Joining me today is the founder for Act for America, a New York Times best-selling author, and author of the new book, Rise, in Defense of Judeo-Christian Values and Freedom, Brigitte Gabriel. Welcome back to the Rubin Report.
Thank you, Dave. I'm delighted to be back with you.
I am delighted that you're here. First off, before we do anything else, I was going to wear the exact same shirt.
I love this shirt. It's a girly shirt.
That is a girly shirt. I love what's going on here. Okay. So I had you on about maybe a year and a half ago or so. You are the only person in the history of the Rubin Report that you caused a tear to formulate in my eye. I think you know exactly when it happened.
Yeah.
So before I even let you say anything, we're throwing to the clip.
We only take care of freedom and preserve it to the next generation. And I am doing my part as an American, as a brave American, in the home of the brave, to make sure I follow in the footsteps of our founding fathers and do my part as they entrusted me with that which they have created. I feel it is my duty to make sure to preserve it, to pass it to my children and their American children and many generations to come. That's why we fight. And I am so fortunate that through this fight, and it is a fight for freedom, for liberty, for democracy, for security, for human rights, I am privileged to meet the most amazing people that I would never otherwise meet, like sitting here with you today, and meet friends that have become lifelong friends, literally like family to me, that I would never have otherwise met if it wasn't doing for what I do. So do I get depressed doing what I do, talking about terrorism and national security? Of course I do. I'm human like everybody. Sometimes I cry. Sometimes I'm completely depressed over things that are happening. Sometimes I hurt deeply by people who stab me in the back or say bad things about me, or even reading my Wikipedia profile. But what keeps me so energized is the American people and the American spirit, knowing that we are making a difference. We are growing. We are changing our country. We are fighting. We have a purpose. So when you and I die on our deathbed, we can look back and we can say, I made a difference, as we take our last breath. And that's enough for me.
That is how you end an interview. I mean, that's it right there. That was like your opus right there.
Well, because I spoke from the heart, and when you speak from the heart, your message resonates with people. And this is exactly why people like you and me are having such traction with a lot of people who are saying, we love what you're saying. It's about time that somebody will say the things that you are saying. Our message is resonating. And you know why? People want something genuine, and they can tell. You know, I always tell my children, the one thing you can never fake, love. You can never fake love. People can tell when you're genuine. And in a world that we live in today, where everything is fake, everything is about social media and how things appear before the camera, and what's in it for me, and I'm going to be your friend because I'm going to get something out of it. When people like you and I put our life on the line because of the conviction that we have about the truth that we are speaking, and why we are willing to go to great extent to just fight for that truth, it resonates with people. So I couldn't wait to be with you today. This is great. What a team.
No, I'm thrilled you're back. Did you always have this kind of passion? I mean, when you were on last time, you told your whole life story, which is absolutely fascinating. If you want to give me just like a 2-minute recap, and we'll link to it down below so people can watch the whole thing if they haven't. So if you want to give me a little recap on that. But I also want to know where that smile, that joy, that presence, where does that come from within you, and did you always have that?
I love life. And I am so passionate about life is because I lived from the age of 10 till the age of 20 waiting to die every single day. So every single day in my formative years, when I opened my eyes and I saw sunshine outside, I didn't know if I'm going to live to see the sunset. So living in a bomb shelter, you know, people ask me where this passion comes from. My 9/11 happened to me in 1975 when radical Islamists blew up my home, bringing it down, burying me under the rubble wounded. I ended up in a hospital for 2.5 months. And later when I came back home, my home was no longer the home I left. I ended up living in this bomb shelter, 8x10 room underground, no electricity, no water, and very little food. And that's where I lived for 7 years of my life, robbed of my youth, barely interacting with people my age. I lived with my parents, who were an elderly couple, in that bomb shelter. So all this cooped up passion. Now I tell people I'm making up for lost time. So I
really
love life. I'm so grateful for life. I'm so grateful for the people I meet, the places I go. I never thought I'd live a day beyond 20, and then I never thought I'd live a day beyond 30. And here I am, living life. I just turned 54 years old. I'm so proud to make it.
Looking good, sister.
Thank you, thank you. When you have survived as long as I have survived, you brag about, I made it to this day at this age. So this is why I love life.
So we're going to link to our original sit down and your whole story about growing up in Lebanon and all that, so people can watch that if they haven't seen it. But not everybody likes you. And I remember before I had you on the first time, when people Google you, and you even referenced this in that clip, but talking about, if you check your Wikipedia or something, people say all sorts of awful things about you and all this. And I was a little worried. I was like, it's like I'm going to have Brigitte on and I'm going to get hate for it and all that. Now I'm really past that part of life now. I just want to do what I think is right, and I want to sit down with people like you and have those conversations. But are you shocked at the kind of pushback you get for defending the West and defending Judeo-Christian values?
I am no longer shocked. I was in the beginning. I was very hurt, very disappointed. I thought my message, of course the West is going to resonate. It's going to resonate, and the West people are going to appreciate why it's important to fight for freedom of speech. I was born and raised in Lebanon, in a country where if you stand up against the status quo and you speak against the regime, you are killed. They come take you in the middle of the night, kill you, you'll disappear, they'll never hear from you again. I still have friends who disappeared 30 years ago. Their parents don't even know if they are alive or dead. Journalists in my country of birth, in Lebanon, get killed for writing the wrong thing. So when I came to the West and when I started speaking in defense of our freedoms and our values and our way of life and the American values of standing up for the truth and speaking the truth without having to be worried about somebody killing you, I could not believe people will come against me like that. But you know what? If you don't stand for something, you have to stand up for what you believe. Those are the people that make a difference. And usually people that make a difference in this world are not popular. The most hated people in the world, look at Churchill. I mean, when he was alive, people hated him. They thought, oh my gosh, look at him today. People quote people that have spoken such words of wisdom, but people laughed at them when they were saying them. And so here we are today. We stand up and we fight, and it doesn't matter what people say about me. I do what I believe is right, because I believe we are on a mission to save Western civilization, which is under attack right now, and I'm willing to do my part to make it happen.
Is part of the problem of the West now is that we don't have enough stories like yours, because we've had it pretty good in the West for the last 50 some odd years. Certainly in the United States, we've had it pretty good here. So we've sort of gotten fat and lazy on freedom. We don't know what we're fighting for. We don't know what the generations before us lived through. You lived through something. So then you come here and then you see all these people that are slowly eroding their freedoms, and you're like, whoa, I know where this leads.
Exactly. My past is America's future, unless America wakes up today. See, I am the Anne Frank who lived to tell about it. Can you imagine if Anne Frank was alive and the Nazis were spreading worldwide and she just escaped the concentration camps and she came to the United States and Nazism started rising in the United States? She would be saying the same words that she said when she was alive. And in my case, I started speaking after the attacks on 9/11 on the United States. I started speaking about the threat of radical Islam to world peace and our national security. But because Americans had it so easy, they cannot fathom that some people can hate us so much. Even though radical Islamic terrorists hijacked airplanes and used them as human missiles, flying them into skyscrapers with the intention of killing not 3,000, but maybe 50,000 that worked in that building. If they were late only 15 minutes, they would have killed tens of thousands of Americans. And so this is what I was talking about. But Americans are such good people in the West who have never experienced the type of terrorism that I lived under, cannot relate and think that somebody could be that bad, that actually that's their real intention, to kill as many people as possible.
So how do you wake people up to that then? Because it's a really hard, because not everyone can have the lived experience that you've had.
You don't have to wake all the people up. You just have to wake some of the people up. You just have to wake up the passionate. In my book, Rise, I say 2% of the passionate will always rule the 98% indifferent. It doesn't take many to change the world. 2% of the passionate will always rule the 98% indifferent. You just need to get people who are fired up for your cause. You need to get people who actually understand the problem and get the problem and want to do something to change the world. Those are the people you need to rally around you. Those are the people who are going to make a difference in this world. And those are the people that I try to communicate with. And because of that, I was able to build an organization, Act for America. I'm proud to tell you that we are now over 1 million members.
That's incredible.
1 million. It's incredible. We have chapters nationwide. We have passed bills, 100 bills on the federal level as well as the state level to protect America. So when people tell me, don't you worry about the names, I mean, people call you names, they make you look bad.
You're on a list. The SPLC
the
got you on a
SPLC
list.
calls me a white supremacist.
Yeah,
How do you like those white supremacist lips and that white supremacist skin and this white supremacist hair? But I tell people, when people slap labels on you, it's because they cannot argue with your facts. That's why the only thing they can do is call you names. They cannot debate you on the facts. And I tell people all the time, don't worry about the labels and don't worry about the haters. The New York Times, in my last book, They Must Be Stopped. The book came out in September of 2008. The New York Times interviewed me. And they couldn't find one quote in my article. So what did they do? They titled the article Radical Islamophobe. Not just an Islamophobe. I am a radical Islamophobe. Can you imagine if I would have let that stop me because I was hurt that somebody didn't like me and they called me a radical Islamophobe? Instead of hiding under a table, trying to kind of pat my emotions, I went there and continued doing exactly what I do best. Since 2008 till today, my organization has helped pass 100 bills. And that's why I tell people, don't let the naysayers and those who slap labels on you stop you. Keep on moving forward.
What do you make of these leftist organizations, whether it's SPLC or the ADL or now in the media, the New York Times, that are actually empowering the very ideologies that would love to take away all of their freedoms? And in this way, I mean, you've got the progressives basically in bed with the Islamists, and to me, it's like they're just sort of willful idiots, or there's probably some other pejoratives I could use there.
Exactly. In my book, Rise, I have a whole chapter titled The Leftist-Islamist Coalition. Yeah. Because that's exactly what we are seeing right now coming together. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So we are seeing two people that do not agree with anything that we say, do not believe in America's exceptionalism, do not believe that America should have strong borders, do not believe that we need to have a national identity. Securing our border, meaning protecting our national identity. They do not believe in borders. They do not believe in language. They want to bring America down on par to the rest of the world. America is equal with Venezuela. No one is better than anybody. All societies are created equal. You and I, that even though people are created equal in the eyes of God, societies are not created equal. And so what we are seeing right now is leftist organizations working with the Islamists. So you've got organizations like the ACLU, the Southern Poverty Law Center, Planned Parenthood, MoveOn.org, working with people like Linda Sarsour, who is a devout Islamist, a proponent of Sharia law, and working with people like her or with CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations. The ACLU is basically the legal arm of CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations.
So do you think they realize what's going on here? This is the part that I'm always sort of, because I don't like impugning people's motives, right? So it's like, do they realize that they're working with people who, once they have the power, will gladly cut them out, right?
No, they don't.
Yeah, they just don't.
They don't. Because people that work for the ACLU, people that work for different leftist organizations have good hearts. They love America. And they cannot believe that people could be bad or people could use them for their end goal. When I talk about the Muslim Brotherhood Project, and you and I have talked about the Muslim Brotherhood Project in our previous interview.
On YouTube
people need to go watch that interview.
We'll link to that as well.
With me.
Yeah.
Everybody watching us right now, they need to go back and watch that previous interview. The Muslim Brotherhood wrote a plan, a 100-year plan for radical Islam to infiltrate and dominate the West and establish an Islamic government on earth. what makes the plan so unique, especially the plan for the United States, for the destruction of America, the last page of the plan for America lists 29 front Islamic organizations set up in the United States with the specific purpose of sabotaging America and destroying it from within. Many of these organizations that I mentioned, ISNA, Islamic Society of North America, the MSA, Muslim Student Association, CARE, which started as IAP, Islamic Association for Palestine, later became CARE because they wanted to create another name because the FBI was on their tail, knowing that they are a Hamas front in the United States. Those are the names mentioned. So what we're seeing right now is people like the ACLU, MoveOn.org, the Southern Poverty Law Center are basically used as the useful idiots at the hands of an Islamist with an agenda. So while I am very upset at how the ADL or the SPLC or the ACLU is taking the side of Islamists against people like me, I'm not sure what they say about you, but I know they hate my guts.
Yeah, they're not big fans.
Yeah. And so I see that, and it's sad to realize that their good intentions are being used to do something bad at the end, but they don't realize it at this point. Meanwhile, they're working with the Islamists against people like me, who basically are trying to warn against the same people who are going to destroy them at the end.
And that's why I frame the question that way, because I don't like attacking people's motives. And I believe that if we were to sit down with all of the people at the ACLU, that the vast majority of them are totally doing all of these things for what they believe to be the right reasons.
The right reasons.
And yet they've been just sort of tricked into having some really unholy alliances.
Well, look, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the same thing. They started as a good organization, fighting the Ku Klux Klan, doing something good. That was their raison d'etre. They raised money, they fought the Ku Klux Klan, and look, the Ku Klux Klan deserves to be in a hole, because we in America will never ever tolerate such true hatred. But for them right now to slap the label hate on anybody who speaks the truth or do not agree with their point of view, they don't know what my heart is. See, I never judge anybody's heart. I am the same way. You never know. People would ask me about Barack Obama. Do you think he's a Muslim? You know, I cannot judge anybody's heart. I don't know who he prays for. I do not know what's between him and his God. It's between him and his God. That's what he does in the privacy of his own home, and I will never judge where he stands. And a lot of people on the right didn't even like me saying those words. But that's the truth. I will never judge what's in somebody's heart or what's in somebody's mind. I judge them by their actions. So now when people slap labels on me, oh, she's a hater. You don't even know me. You have never even sat down with me and talked with me. How can you slap a label, an emotional label, on somebody that you don't even know?
If you're a hater, you're a seriously much better actress than hater, because you got me fooled, lady.
I'm telling you. I mean, you know, it is so sad to see that coming from them, and they're not listening to whatever explanation, or even when we reach out to them, they don't want to talk to us. They don't want to hear our side of the view. It's like they judged us in absentia, and that is it. You know, speaking of judging in absentia, they are no better than the terrorists in Lebanon. You know, I went to Israel this year and visited my parents' grave. I do not know if you know, my parents are buried with Oscar Schindler on Mount Zion. And so this was the first time.
Can you quickly tell people how you ended up in Israel after leaving Lebanon?
Well, I left Lebanon. I ended up moving to Israel, becoming news anchor for World News, and working in Jerusalem. And when my parents died, I wanted to make sure that I buried them in Israel, because I wanted to make sure that my children yet unborn will always know where my loyalty lies. And because I'm a firm believer that actions speak louder than words. So I wanted to make sure I honor my parents, because I adore my parents. This is a very sensitive subject with me. I'm an only child. I worship my parents. I live every single day of my life doing everything I do to honor them and their legacy. And you know, speaking of hatred, some former employer did me wrong when I was 22 years old. And I remember sitting on my father's lap in his wheelchair, hugging him. I was crying. And I said, oh, Daddy, I just hate them. I can't believe they did this to us. And my father said to me, he said, I never, ever want to hear that word coming out of your mouth. I never raised you to hate. And if for nothing else, because of the way I adore my father, at that day, at 22 years old, I vowed I will never hate somebody. My father died like 2 weeks later. I will never, ever allow hate to enter my heart towards my enemies, towards anybody. I don't hate anybody. So when my parents died, I buried them in Jerusalem. They are buried with Oscar Schindler on Mount Zion, where actually later he was brought in and buried next to them. So this year I went back to Lebanon, to Israel. And because I cannot go to Lebanon, Hezbollah wants me dead. So I go to Israel, I visit Israel, I meet with the IDF. I actually was the first Lebanese person to ever make it to the rooftop of the IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv. And I recorded videos with the spokesperson of the IDF and with the top generals. We recorded videos to be broadcast to the United Nations, to the international community. Video to be broadcast to Lebanon about why we need to work together towards peace, why we need to love each other. Put hate aside, forget what you're told about the Jews. Israel doesn't want anything but peace with its neighbors. Let's work together on peace. And for that, Hezbollah aired that on Lebanese television. They charged me with treason. Now I am wanted dead in Lebanon and sentenced to death by hanging in absentia. So here we have a group of terrorists in my home country of Lebanon who judged me and who I am, and I deserve to be sentenced to death by hanging because they did not agree with me preaching a message of love about being friends with the Jews. So here we have them calling me haters, and yet I have the leftists in America, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and these people calling me haters simply because I'm warning about the Islamic terrorist threat.
All right, well, you've got too much good in you to focus on the haters, but I do have one other question about the haters, and then we're going to just put it behind us, which is when Majid Nawaz sued the Southern Poverty Law Center, and now he's been removed from their anti-Muslim extremist list. And you are on there still, as far as I know. Is Ayan still on there? I'm not sure.
Actually, Ayan is still over there. You know, me and Ayan, of course. Are you kidding?
Well, Linda Sarsour also wants your...
wants my private parts removed. Miss Women's Feminist Movement, you know. But the world is turned upside down. So we are still on that list.
Did you consider a lawsuit or anything? Because I'm not generally for lawsuits in these cases. But Majid proved that if they've really wronged you and you can get the backing to get the lawyers to do it, that ultimately justice does prevail.
We talked to our attorneys to sue them, and it's going to cost a lot of money, and they can drag it for years and years and years. They've got 90 attorneys on staff. Well, we have to depend on the generosity of attorneys to do it pro bono. They can drag it forever. Plus, because I'm a public person and the head of an organization, that will get us into discovery, which means they not only can subpoena me, which I don't say anything bad, I'm not worried, but they can go after my chapters and any communications our chapters have done with their friends. Now, our chapters are completely independent. Their members are completely independent. I don't even know who they are. Right. So if somebody sent a personal email to a third party mentioning any word about hate, which we are completely not responsible for because they don't speak about headquarters, they can say, see, we told you they've got people that hate. And so because I do not know 3-4 levels down, see, Najid doesn't have a national organization, definitely not with chapters and members the way we do. So he's only responsible for what he says. I can fight and defend what I say, but I cannot fight and defend what people that I don't even know. Look, the SPLC went after us and they said, oh, we've got white supremacists, you know, who show up to our rallies. We held rallies on the side street corner. Anybody can stand on the side street corner. You know, you cannot say that these members belong to my organization. But they do. And that's the tactic of the left right now.
All right. Let's focus on the book. So the subtitle is In Defense of Judeo-Christian Values and Freedom. So just most simply, if someone said to you, what are Judeo-Christian values? What are they? What are the most fundamental Judeo-Christian values that we need to know?
Well, Judeo-Christian values are the bedrock of Western civilization. They are the foundation of what we have today in America. And this is not a religious book at all. You read it, you endorsed it. It's not a religious book.
I got a little blurb in there.
What? You got a little blurb in there. What are the most fundamental freedoms? I'll give you a perfect example. Freedom of speech. People don't realize where that freedom comes from. You know, in Israel, the Hasidic Jews, they debate the Bible. 24 hours a day, that's all they do. They debate the Bible. And where does that come from? The Bible says, come, let's reason together. Means let's debate ideas. I may not like your idea, you may not like mine. And we can have 5 other people who may look at the same verse completely differently. But the reason why we debate ideas is because we can learn from each other and better understand understand what statements mean, where the author who wrote that statement meant by it. We all know that God didn't write the Bible, people wrote the Bible. So part of our fundamental way of thinking, the freedom of speech, the ability to come together and debate ideas and passionately debate these ideas, yet agree to respectfully disagree and walk away, people don't realize that comes from the foundation of Judeo-Christian foundation. You know, even people who are not religious understand that's so uniquely Western. You know, they don't do that in the Islamic world, for example. You don't debate ideas. Why? Because in the Quran was written, it's the word of God, it's not debatable, it's not negotiable, you cannot look back, you cannot change verses. You don't even talk about it. You cannot even question it. Very different than the way we are. So when I write in the book about, and I have a chapter titled The Death of Free Speech, where I talk about how we are losing our ability to speak the truth, because then you're labeled, you're bigot, people are afraid. Am I going to be, blackmailed? Am I going to be boycotted? Am I going to lose my job? And so we're silencing ourselves. And that's why I titled the book Rise, Rise in Defense of Judeo-Christian Values and Freedom, because we're losing those freedoms, those American values before our very eyes.
Are you watching this chip away more in Europe than in the United States right now? For all our problems around this, and I agree, the bigger problem right now is that we're silencing ourselves rather than the government coming to silence us, although that could potentially be a problem in the future. I don't sense it's a huge problem right now. Europe has a whole other set of problems around free speech. Do you think that they're more suited to lose faster because they don't have a First Amendment the way we do?
Oh yeah, they are far more advanced in losing their rights and their freedoms than we are. And they did it by self-censorship. You know, I landed in London. I was speaking in London in 2007. So I land in London. I'm standing there waiting for my luggage with the pilot and the hostesses. We were in a private section. And they said, oh, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, I'm just here for like 3 days. I'm giving a speech in Parliament. I was speaking to the British Parliament. And they said, oh, what are you going to be talking about? And I said, the threat of radical Islam to world peace and national security.
Uh-oh.
And all of a sudden, silence. For 30 seconds, you could hear a pin drop. They didn't know how to react or what to say. They were so afraid to react lest somebody hears something. The taxi driver, my driver picked me up to drive me to my hotel. And we were talking in the car, and I told him, he asked me again, what are you doing here? And I said the same thing. He said, Brigitte, in 10 years, I believe we're going to have blood on the streets of London by radical Islamists. We are at war. And it didn't even take 10 years. Within 5 years, we already started seeing stabbing on the streets of London and stuff like that. So in Europe, they are afraid to talk about it, and they do not have the freedom of speech that we have. And that's why it is so important to defend the freedom of speech that we have. And God bless them, our founding fathers, with their wisdom, they knew exactly what they were doing. I mean, look, remember, they came from Europe. Yeah. So when they wrote us, when they gave us the Constitution and our Bill of Rights and all of that stuff, they knew exactly why they put some of these amendments in there.
So, all right, so let's just put Europe aside. Since we're in the United States, they're going to have to deal with that. We'll deal with it here. Okay, we can get people to rise, but what else do we have to do to have a discussion about this that's going to stop the people that are going to use all of those labels? So I know, even in the book, you make a point of saying, of course, this is not all Muslims, and don't be bigoted towards Muslim people. We're talking about an ideology. A lot of people have been doing that for the last couple of years, tried to separate people from ideas and all that, and still get all the labels thrown at them. What are some of the other techniques we can use to talk about these things and not be crushed by all the labels?
Don't waste your breath, because there is nothing you can say at this point, no matter what you say. The enemy, the SPLC, the ADL, MoveOn.org, Organizing for Action, all the progressive organizations, they're not willing to listen to you. They don't want to listen to you. Look, we organized March Against Sharia, March for Human Rights last year, a year and a half ago. And we had rallies in 29 cities in 21 states. And we timed it with the Pulse nightclub bombing in Florida, because it was June 10th. We wanted to shine a light about the hatred of this ideology against gays, what they do to gays. I mean, look at the Pulse nightclub bombing. The people that organized our rallies in New York. It was organized and headed by two gay guys. The rally in Atlanta was headed by a Muslim man. We had an imam speaking in Seattle. We had Miriam Ibrahim, the Sudanese survivor, speak at our rally in Virginia Beach, as well as the Iranian Muslim leader of the Iranian movement, to move away from the mullahs.
Yeah.
Did you think any of the media covered any of that? All they did is show up on the street corner, say no hate, say no to hate, say no to hate. They didn't even bother understand what we were doing. So don't waste your breath. Right now, people tell me, why are you speaking to the choir, Brigitte? We need to talk to other people. At this time, you need to mobilize the choir. Because when you need your house cleaned, it is the choir that shows up. It is the choir that brings you food when you're sick. It is the choir that mops the church or the temple when it needs cleaning. It's the choir that brings the flowers. And that's all that matters to keep your house up and keep it protected. And that's why right now, don't waste your breath on the labels. Make sure you fight. Make sure you lobby your elected officials. Make sure you understand the power of the gavel, why it is important to call your elected officials. In my book, what makes this book so unique is at the end of every chapter, I have a section titled Rise Up and Act, where I give people ideas.
So I want to do all that at the end. I want all of your absolute advice on this. But you hit on something that I think is really interesting there, how there's a connection to all of this and the way the media reports.
Yeah.
You're right, that when they cover your events or when they cover a lot of the people that I'm friends with, that I have on the show, whatever they say, it's like they only focus on the haters. They only focus on the one little outsider that's doing something that's bad and not on all the good. How do you think this happened to the media? Or is there a way that it can be fixed, or does it need to burn to the ground, or what?
Because the progressive media is not interested in dialogue. They are interested in winning. See, we on the conservative side, and it's such a shame. I never thought of myself as a conservative. I mean, I don't know if I told you, I voted for Al Gore. I was a proud Democrat. I'm a 9/11, conservative, as they call us, conservative. But this is where we are in our nation right now. They consider people like you conservative because you speak about, important issues that are now known as, that's what the conservatives talk about. So what we are seeing right now is the media is interested in winning. While we are interested in having a dialogue, how can we get through to them? How can we speak with them, and find a bridge where we can talk to them about that? They're not interested in talking to us. They're interested in silencing our voices. And the sooner we know that, the better we are in fighting our battle and learning how to win our battle. And you add to that, funders like Soros. In my book, I have a whole section about Soros and him funding the media. Mm-hmm. Soros right now has spent...
Doesn't that make you an anti-Semite if you talk about Soros? That's their new meme.
I didn't even know he was Jewish until about a year ago.
Right, and everything that he does is usually against Israel and a whole bunch of other things. So it's the height of
exactly,
stupidity,
the height of stupidity. You would think he sounds and talks like an anti-Semite, much more than me. Remember, he is the one who worked with the doctors, with the Nazis, and actually had a smile when people asked him, how did you feel about going in and working with the Nazis against your own people? He said, well, somebody had to do it, so I didn't see any problem with it.
Yeah, you're not making that up, by the way.
No. I mean, I watched his interview because I was very interested on what makes this man the way he is. I study my enemies. I spend a lot of hours actually studying my enemies to understand how they think. Why do they behave? Trying to pick up on cues. So you look at somebody like George Soros, who is interested in transforming America into his vision of how the world should be. And he has the billions and he's willing to spend it. 43 billion has already been spent on the media, on Soros-funded media entities since 2002. And so when you look today at Soros's tentacles that extend to 33 media outlets, including ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, The Washington Post, the Associated Press, which I detail in my book. Even to give you an example, which I talk in the book, Columbia School of Journalism gave them $600,000 to their journalism school because he wanted to impact the reporting on how reporters report on the media issues in the future. So nobody was paying attention to this stuff. But this is exactly how we end up with reporters who are no longer reporters. They are activists with a national platform, media platform, who get on television every night and basically spew the same talking political points approved by Soros. And they all say the same thing, whether it's the Huffington Post, the New York Times, the Associated Press, Reuters, MSNBC, CNBC, ABC, the same buzzword. And it's all coordinated.
How concerned are you that on the social media front, where people like you have been able to make gains, I'll see every now and again you'll talk about, I just suddenly lost 5,000 followers on Twitter or something like that, that we're fighting a losing battle on that front ultimately because these companies, A, I think there are a lot of political connections and who knows what's going on behind the scenes, but B, they've basically embraced the leftist ideology and they're not really around to make sure that Brigitte Gabriel's voice can be heard.
Well, we lose followers by the tens of thousands. And we are seeing that happen, especially now at a dramatic pace. But you continue on doing what you are doing. There's nothing you can do to change it. You just continue pushing. We are working with members of Congress to make sure that there is fairness in reporting and that the government will intervene to make sure that we don't have a monopoly. Look, they did the same thing with Microsoft. Remember, Microsoft had a monopoly. Yeah. The government had to intervene and they said, no, you cannot stop anybody else who wants to develop computers. Apple didn't have a chance if the government didn't intervene with Microsoft. So we know that there is precedent. But here is the secret to success.
All my bells, my libertarian brain, all the bells go off on that stuff, though, because I don't want the government to do it. It's like, for me, it's like the last resort, even though I know that this is obviously a very personal issue to me as someone that puts this up on YouTube and the rest of it.
We want fairness. We're not telling them silence anybody, but we are saying to them, allow people to speak their mind. If I own a media platform and I do not agree with you at all in what you say, as an American, I will bite my tongue and grit my teeth and listen to what I absolutely passionately oppose. I'm not saying you, but anybody. You could be saying, whoever. But I will fight for your right to do it. I will not silence you because it is un-American to silence you. So as Americans, we owe it to each other, at least to defend these rights so we can pass them on to our future generations. You never really own freedom, David. We only preserve it for the future generation. And I said that statement with you before, and I actually have it going all throughout my book. These are the rights that our founding fathers gave everything, and most of them died broke to give us these rights that we have today. The least we can do is preserve it for the next generation. That's all we're asking for. But you know the secret to success, regardless of how much the social media puts you in Facebook jail or Twitter bans you or shadow ban you, etc.? Tenacity, tenacity, tenacity. You keep on pushing, you keep on pushing, you keep on pushing, and you never, ever, ever give up. That is the secret to success.